both of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at a classic with the King Crab. We've got two body kits here, the very classic one on the left and a very modern one on the right. It is a machine that's been around for quite some time, and there's a few different body kits out there, and some of them are quite weird and some of them are quite practical. It's the Big Mech in the Crab family, even though it doesn't share many design aesthetics and design specs with the original Crab outside of a crabby looking look. It's still a good mech, but it's not one that I've had good results with over the year. I do know of a particular King Crab that I like and that I like working on, but the other ones I've always had issues with. They always came up short in the various formations that I worked on. It's mainly a popular machine because the various 3DO and video games that are out there use it as a big bad boss mech for a lot of things because, well, it was one of those mechs that could show up during the Succession War, and that was too advanced or too fancy and makes a good big boss bad guy. So let's get into it. The King Crab is the brainchild of a fairly young Alexander Kerensky right after he took the reins of the SLDF in 2738. To be honest, becoming the top general in the largest military at the time, well, of all time, I should actually say here, at the age of 38 is pretty darn impressive. Of course, his pathway to glory was set from the start here. He had a very good mentor. He had a very good position in the military to begin with. He was not a Nepo baby, but close to it if you look at the numbers at least. In 2741, 3 years later, he commissioned Cosara weaponries to build a machine capable of doing devastating damage very quickly. While we know the Atlas a lot more nowadays for the mechs built by Kerensky, the King Crab is also a machine that served heavily in the SLDF at the time and was meant to replace some of the existing machines that they had that were getting a bit old and long on the tooth, like things like the Pillager. Really, the PLG-3Z Pillager was getting pretty old at the time. I do like it a little bit more than the King Crab, of course, but it does require a lot more advanced technology, and even with Gauss rifles and stuff like that, it gets a little bit dicey. You still had a bunch of PLG-1N that were still in reserve unit in the Star League as well, and that one was much closer to the King Crab with a pair of AC-20s. Looking at it now, most officers would probably want to refit those two 3Z versions of the Pillager because Gauss rifles and jump jets, I mean, you lose a little bit on the damage potential, but the increased range and the ability to, take out targets at decent enough range rather than having to go right up in their face is probably better. Paired AC-20s give you a whole lot of punch, and it's really devastating, but you need to be right next to the target to make it work. It's a bit of a trade. Even though it had been in production for a little while here, the reason the King Crab was so rare during the Succession War era is that Ameris basically leveled Cosara's facilities on Mars in 2767. They had a backup facility on Northwind, but that one got leveled during the first Succession War in a fight between Aus Liao and Aus Davion. Add to this that Kerensky basically took as many of the advanced one as he could with him during Operation Exodus. You basically add a number of King Crab floating around by the end of the Third Succession War, which could be counted on both hands, and that's for the entire inner sphere. Some of them popped up in weird places. There was one in the Oregon Confederation for a little while here during the weird civil war we had over here. There was a number of them floating around during Jake Mason's legendary career. But, I mean, in the end, they weren't common enough to be a problem for anyone, and the 100-tonner of choice during that period was still the Atlas. When Jerome Blake took over Terra, however, he did secretly rebuild and repair a lot of the factories that were around in order to keep the comm guards fairly well equipped. A lot of those factories were mothballed or really true limited production through most of the Succession War, but they were ready to be reused when required. By the early 31st centuries, the leaders at ComStar realized that they needed to rebuild and re-equip their forces, especially when they realized there were some weirdos that started showing up with a weird wolf logo from Blake knows where, and that quickly turned into more and more people that they didn't know where they were showing up from, causing more and more issues. While the King Crab served dutifully during the Battle of Tukayyid, I would say that new designs started really coming out when the word of Blake took or retook, depending on which side of the border you're asking, the planet of Terra. Many of these machines were built to specs for the jihadis, but the ComGuards wanted them as well, so they sent a corporate espionage team to steal the plans for the King Crab. That's why you've got now a whole bunch of new King Crab coming out of StarCorp with a Son Oa logo on them. You still have GM as well building some of those somewhere. I never managed to find out where exactly. There might be a weird GM hidden world somewhere building all sorts of fancy things that we don't know about, or that we'll learn about through Battle Thunder at some point. So let us start with the OG and what was copied by all those later models here with the regular King Crab 000. This one has a cockpit module that has an advanced command computer in it, meaning that it's yet another SLDF command mech in the long list of machines that they have. Outside of this, though, the only really fancy bit on that 100-ton machine is 16 tons of case-protected ferrofibrous armor, which is okay, I guess. I'd rather go with endo steel on those larger mechs than ferrofibrous because you're going to use up a lot of the internal space for it, and you get a lot more savings off of the endo steel. But still, that's what they went with, and the engine is the most common engine of the time, and of all time probably, with the Vlar 300, which was in the previous Mackeys and Pillagers, also on the Atlas later on, and the Marauder, and so on and so forth. So many mechs use it. A top speed of 54 kilometers per hour is seen as sufficient at the time, and I would say that even nowadays, on a 100-ton mech, going faster than 54 kilometers per hour means you're investing a whole lot in the engine, which is not always a great idea. The whole thing, at least for the original model, is cooled down with 15 standard heat sinks, which is a little bit odd to me, especially looking at it as a SLDF command machine, but this was 40 machines that were meant for the line regiments. In order to effectively single salvo any other mechs down, the King Crab uses a pair of Death Giver 20 class autocannons in each of its big claws. 2 tons of reloads I don't think is sufficient in my opinion, but it really depends on what you're going to be using this machine for. As a siege breaker, it will be enough. As a line combat machine, probably not. To back this up, you get a shoulder-mounted Exostar large laser, which is a decent enough model. I prefer the Defiances to it, but it's still okay, and it'll give you some direct firepower at longer range or if your ammo runs out. Finally, you get a 15 rack of LRM on the opposite shoulder, allowing some bombardment capabilities, but you still have only a single ton of reload, which I don't think is quite sufficient. I would say a lot of my misgivings with the original model comes from the fact that it's not a top-of-the-line model, but really a line combat model. The Royal Divisions of the SLDF and the other top-line commanders got their own model with the Triple OB. This one uses 12 double heat sinks rather than 15 singles, which allows the people at Cosara to double the amount of ammo that you carry for the AC-20s. Finally, with that extra ton that they have left, they add an Artemis 4 guidance to the LRM 15 rack, which is a little bit odd. I'd almost add another ton of LRM ammo. It might be better for longer fights. It is what they decided to go with. There was another side design at the time with the KGC 010, which was developed in secret by Cosara for the Star League. It has 19 tons of standard plates on an endo steel chassis, like I said earlier, probably a smarter plan. And for weapons, you get an experimental PPC and 6-tube of SRM assembly in each side torso, giving you a very good range and pretty nice firepower. The arms now load smaller LB-10X autocannons fed by 6 tons of reload, so you're going to have a lot of time shooting at stuff with that. All of those disappeared with Kerensky during the Exodus, and I haven't heard of anybody actually rebuilding them. The Triple O and the Triple OB, however, were rebuilt by ComStar over the years on their various assembly lines, and are probably the more common ones, at least nowadays. Really, if you wanted anything to do with the king crab during the succession war, you had to go through GM. They have that unidentified factory somewhere in the Federated Suns that were building new machines very slowly and spare parts for the ones that were still around. The 2815 KGC 4 zeros actually removes the case system and used the saved weight to bolster the armor, which they had to downgrade from ferrofibers to standard plates. Outside of that, it's basically the same king crab as the 000. If Cosara had told ComStar to fuck off and decided to keep building the king crab for the general public, this thing would probably have been quite common in the inner sphere. But with Cosara just building spare parts for ComStar, GM was had basically the monopoly on the darn things, and well, they built a couple a year and shipped them to whoever was paying them the big bucks. But what about the clans, you ask? In the end, the king crab was phased out quite quickly amongst the clan, mostly because even though they had a large inventory of them, what they were running out of were shells for the 20 class autocannon. The gun itself had gone obsolete, with LBX 20s and Ultra 20s replacing it, and the ammo for it had become incredibly rare. What the clans did, rather than keep upgrading the king crabs, was replace it with the Supernova in 2846, using 6 big energy weapons rather than 2 big guns to melt enemies down. The Supernova had its own video, and it's a pretty good mech overall. The first modern upgraded king crab came out for the Battle of Tukayyid with the Clanbuster KGC-001. This one is less survivable because it does use an XL engine to save on some weight, but the arm guns are replaced with Gauss rifles with 2 tons of a reload each, meaning you are going to be able to stay in the fight quite a long time, and it really matches that previous pillager now. The large laser is replaced with a large pulse laser. You've got the same range as a regular AC-20 in this case. I would probably have preferred an ER large laser, but I'm not the one who designed it. And you keep the LRM-15 as well, giving you very good long-range firepower. At closer range, you also have a pair of 2 tube of SRM, giving you some tank hunting and battle armor hunting capabilities, and just a little backup in case something gets close. One of the popular king crab of the era as well is Jake Mason's Carapace, which is a king crab from that era as well, but it was a one-off model that he stole off a Lyran general because there was some fighting going on. Basically, a disgruntled Lyran general was threatening some nuclear bombs, and Jake Mason and his team of crack Mechwarriors stopped them. As a reward, he did grab the big mech and brought it with him, and it's a special configuration which he kept around and kept upgrading. We keep seeing that thing showing up in the yard here whenever the Mason's Marauders show up. It's got 4 Ultra AC-5s in the arms rather than a pair of 20 class autocannons, so you have almost the same damage potential at far longer range, but you have the risk of jamming your guns. The shoulders pack 15 rack of LRM each instead, but Fahad, the head engineer for the Marauders, decided that he didn't need those LRM-15 and preferred 6 tubes of SRM instead, allowing you to have some short-range punch in case something gets close by. A quite decent machine, and that's probably my favorite version of the King Crab overall. Next up is ComGuard and the word of Blake Jihadi's favorite version of the king crab, the KGC-005, originally coming out in 3062 before the whole Jihad thing started. This one here is like most ComStar machine of the day with a C3i computer, and in order to make room for that, they went with an endosteel chassis. This means that the body is made of standard plates, but it's not much of an issue. This is cooled by 12 double heatsinks, which is quite reasonable. The big guns are swapped for LB-20X with the feeding mechanism in the torsos rather than just in the arm, which runs a little bit cooler and has a little bit more range than your standard AC-20, meaning that they're generally better. And those are fed by 6 tons of reload, so you're going to be able to stick around for a long time. The large laser is upgraded to an ER large laser, giving you more range there as well, and the 15 rack of LRM is replaced with a pair of 4 tubes of Streak SRM, giving you more short-range punch and some ability to take out tanks fairly well. This is another very good one in my book. As the factories to build that machine were in the hands of the Jihadi, the Loyalist Comguard units stole the plans for that particular King Crab and started building their own through the people at StarCorp with the 005R. This one came out in 3071. The C3I system is replaced with a standard C3 slave unit, and one of the Streak SRM4 is removed entirely. You shave off a tiny little bit of armor on top of all of that, but you replace the ER large laser with an heavy PPC, allowing you to have a very nice long-range punch on top of things. This is not my favorite, but it works quite well, and it still has the short-range potential of one Streak SRM4. It has the big guns, it has an heavy PPC, which can give you a very nice threat range, so it does everything well enough. But before that happened, Cosara was still happy to just build weapon and sell them, and they really didn't care if they were supporting jihadis or whoever with them. In 3069, they came out with the KGC-008, which is a departure from the original model because it adds a set of jump jets to let you jump 90 meters. The main guns are also swapped for a pair of heavy PPC packed by a pair of light AC2s. In order to keep shooting this, you do need 17 double heatsinks, which is good enough. And it also has a C3I computer, as most Jihadi machines would, and it's defended by a Guardian ECM, so your own C3 networks are not going to be broken up. Quite a decent thing, and the ability to shoot at decent range and jump around makes you an okay sniper. With StarCorp having their hands on the nice plans for the King Crab, thanks to ComStar, they decided to get to work on their own model as well. The 007, if you know the history of 007, you'll like that as well, feature a pair of rotary AC-5 in the arms, fed by 6 tons of reload. At the speed at which you eat true ammo on a rotary AC-5, that's what you're going to need if you want to stay in a decently long fight. As a backup, each of the arms also has a light PPC, giving you a little bit of okay range and a little bit more damage. Add to this a plasma rifle on the shoulder and a Streak 6 tube of SRM, and you're going to have the full package of something fairly scary. You have light ferrofibrous to protect the body now. It's an okay idea. You could almost go with standard and nobody would really see a big difference. And you have 11 double heatsinks to keep you decently cool. The final official model, we're going to see that there's new ones as well here, but the final official model comes from StarCorp, and it's the KJC-009. This one makes the mistake of using a heavy-duty gyro rather than an armored compact gyro, which is strictly better, along with a small cockpit and an endo-steel chassis to save on some weight, even though you're using more for the gyro. It's not a big deal. This is incredibly tough with 19 tons of standard plates, which is the maximum you can put on pretty much, and a Guardian ECM to protect you against enemy electronics. The arm now pack a plasma rifle and a light AC-5, which is a bit of an interesting mix, but gives you a little bit less firepower than most of the other models, I would say. And the side torso mount a duo of weapon, each of them having a medium laser and an MML7, giving you decent utility as well. It's not a bad version of the King Crab, but it's such a departure from the original that I'm not sure I'm really sold on it, I would say. Like I said here, this is the last official model. There's a few weird things floating around. A derivative of the 009, the 009C, which copies the personal mech of Othman Maximilian Marius, which is a particular guy in the Lyran Commonwealth. This guy had access to some clan technology, so the MML7s and the light AC5s and the whole thing there is replaced with a clan AG-20, giving you very nice range and a nasty bite against flyers. At longer range, you're going to lose a little bit because the spread's going to get a little thin, but at close range, this thing is going to be even nastier. The medium lasers are also replaced with ER small lasers, generally of clan make, but not always when you buy a 009C. The problem is that StarCorp doesn't know how to build any clan graded gear at the moment, and they have to import everything from either Clan Seafox, Clan Wolf, or Clan Snow Raven if they're lucky. Basically, they have to get the parts from somewhere. They can't build them in-house. So if you get it, look at the small lasers and look at the range you're going to get on them, and it should tell you if they're the good clan kind or the okay inner sphere kind. Finally, Cosara still wants to make money on the King Crab, so they released a thing that will probably never really sell. The KJC-011 used the 400XXL engine rather than the 300 to get speeds of up to 64 kilometers per hour. On top of that, they coupled the assembly with a supercharger, so you can technically get a speed of 86 kilometers per hour in your King Crab. The chassis is made of fragile composite material to save on weight as well, but it doesn't take any more extra internal room, so at least there's that. For weapons, well, you have a 15 rack of rockets for a one-time punch, and a pair of LB-20X autocannon with 6 tons of reload, which is pretty darn good, and a plasma rifle, which balances things out. The problem is it basically costs the same as a small dropship. It will break in the first fight it's going to take, and you won't be able to fix it on most front lines. I'm not sure if they're going to keep building that thing now that the Wolves have taken Terra. Maybe they'll build a derivative on it based on clan technology. We really don't know much else about it right now. The King Crab is quite popular and looks really cool, mostly thanks to various 3DO shows and games. In my opinion, though, it's got the looks, but it really doesn't have the touch. There's very few of them that I would actively hunt down. I would have to upgrade most of them to clan gear if I want them to be efficient enough, or at least mount LBX-20s in the arms. That gives you enough range for those big guns to be efficient enough in most fights. In the end, the one that I would really recommend people try getting is the Royal variant, or the one with the Rack 5s in the arms. I mean, Rack 5s are pretty deadly as well. You can, however, do far worse than a King Crab if you're looking for a big, scary mech, or a big, scary anything, really. It's not a bad machine, it's just pretty rare in many instances, and you'll have to be friends with some very weird people in order to get them. Or StarCorp. I might be repeating myself here. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you very much for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.